Virgil, Erwin, and when I got out of the Navy, I was a lieutenant. This was probably the largest swift boat operation in Vietnam, to my knowledge. It was called Operation Silver Mace, and we had 13 swift boats. We had 240 Vietnamese Marines from the 6th Battalion and 10 UDT guys, Underwater Demolition Team 13, and we had 2 Seawolf helicopters. And we were all based on our mothership, which was the Westchester County, LST 1167, I think. And the ship was anchored about 10 miles off the southern tip of Vietnam. And our objective was to go into a river called the Dong Quio to search for Viet Cong. We were only really supposed to have 12 swift boats. The 13th boat was PCF 43, and the skipper was Lieutenant Don Droz. And the UDT guys climbed onto his boat and brought with them about 1,000 pounds of C4 explosives to be a part of the operation. And Captain Hoffman, who was the senior skipper for all of us, did not want Don to go because his boat couldn't maintain as high a speed as the rest of us. It was really, the boat needed some TLC. And Don Droz argued with the captain and said, my boat is okay and I want to go. And he kept that up, and finally Captain Hoffman said, okay, yeah, I'll let you go, but you insert that UDT team at the first insertion point in the river and then you exit. And so finally they gave us permission to get underway. It was about 5 p.m. We had to go in when the tides were as high as possible because the mouth of the river is shallow. Once you get into the river, it's deep. So here's 13 boats going in to this river mouth, all stretched out with 20 Vietnamese Marines on the first 12 swift boats and the UDT guys on the last one. And I'm third in line. And the first 2 swift boats hit sandbars and got stuck for a few minutes. And my helmsman, Jim Hoffman, watching a fathometer, just made a slight S-curve around him, and watching the fathometer maintained deep water, and we were headed in an hour first. And I kept looking back outside the pilot house to make sure that other swift boats were staying with me because I didn't want to be in that river alone, and I was kind of scared about being first. Just after we got into the river, the radio came on and the officer in tactical command ordered the first 5 boats to beach on the left side, and we did. And all our Marines then jumped onto the beach and set up a defensive perimeter and then ran into the jungle to make sure that there weren't any Viet Cong waiting for us. And the other 8 swift boats continued upriver. Now Bill Schumendine, who was on PCF 5, is now in lead. And PCF 43 continued upriver. He either ignored the order or he forgot that he was supposed to stop and exit. The officer in tactical command was really kind of unusual. It was a Coast Guard commander. And we'd never had a Coast Guard commander in charge of a swift boat operation. Which is even stranger is that he'd only been in country 2 weeks. So he was a newbie. We called him Cherry. And so he was on PCF 31, probably in the middle of this eight boats. And what they were going to do was called a pincer strategy. We're going to offload, we've offloaded 100 Vietnamese Marines near the mouth of the river. They're going to go further upstream and offload another 140. And these guys are going to then do a sweep. And if our intelligence was correct, we'd have the Viet Cong in the middle. And the swift boats would then offer gunfire support or prevent a river escape. And the Seawolf helicopters would launch off of the LST, come in, and prevent an escape in the back. So it sounded like a great plan. Well, a half hour after these 8 boats went upriver, I started hearing gunfire and then explosions. And then all of a sudden the radio came on, and then people were screaming and yelling and talking over each other. The radio discipline was absolutely non-existent.
I have one Victor November officer wounded. Break. I say his troops will not go ashore without him. Request advised, over.
I see we got one person.
Tell the troops to go ashore. If they won't go ashore, there's nothing we can do. We've got too much other problems. Let's try to make them go ashore.
See what we can do for them on the other side.
21 up on the line. 21, 5 or 21, come up on the line, over.
And so we knew that an ambush had started, and it was a horrific ambush. That B-40 rockets and Claymore mines and recoilless rifles and 50 caliber machine guns and AK-47s were all just pouring onto these guys. And what is remarkable to me is that after the first couple of boats were being hit, the other boats behind could have stopped and pulled into the bank short of the ambush, but not one did. All 8 boats wanted to stay together, and they all were going through this ambush, and they were just getting raked, one after another. Bill Schumedine's boat, PCF-5, was the first one to get hit. A Vietnamese Marine on the fantail lost both of his legs right at the pelvis. PCF-51 took a B-40 rocket into the main cabin and another one into the engine room. And it killed the quartermaster, Thomas Holloway. And they just barely made it out of the ambush and ended up tying up to a tree just beyond. PCF-43 was lagging behind. So all the boats had already cleared the ambush by the time 43 got there. They immediately got hit by a B-40 rocket right into the pilot house. It killed Don Gross. And the next B-40 rocket hit the chest of the only hospital corpsman we had on the operation. And his name was Worthington, and of course he was killed. And so now the boat is still going with throttles all the way forward and out of control. And PCF-43 just veered to the left and went right into the middle of the ambush and ended up onto the beach a little bit. Well, the guys, the boat was canted over to the starboard side. They couldn't use their 50 caliber machine guns from that position, so they all jumped off the boat, the UDT crew and the swift boat crew, and they were hiding down along the hull. They ended up in a hand-to-hand throwing hand grenades, and the VC were throwing hand grenades back. And the last boat ahead of PCF-43 was PCF-38. They were the only ones to see the 43 get hit and go into this ambush site. They turned around and were coming back into the kill zone to help. And they immediately got hit by 2 B-40 rockets. One of them went into the pilot house and injured the skipper, Tom Gilbert. But he managed to get back to the aft steering on the fantail, trying to steer the boat. They got hit by another B-40, which knocked out one of their engines, and their rudders jammed full left. So they just circled around out of control. The crew managed to establish an emergency steering to get them out, but they couldn't help the 43. So they were trying to tell someone. I kept hearing their voice, and it was, as I said, chaotic conversation. So I could hear 43 boat, but I didn't know what it meant, and no one was responding. So I said, we got to do something. So we backed into the river and started heading up to the ambush site. And Chuck Moan on PCF 103 backed in and was going with me. So I thought, boy, you know, this is, at least someone's coming with me. But I was scared. It's one thing to get into an ambush when you don't see it coming, but when you know you're going into it, it's different. And the first time since I'd been in Vietnam, I put on flak pants, which are short trousers to protect your lower extremity. And So as we're headed up the river, I hear the Seawolf helicopters report into the Officer and Tactical Command that they're orbiting overhead. This lieutenant commander, or this commander, Coast Guard commander, he said, I need you to evacuate my wounded. And the Seawolves replied back, you know, we're loaded with rockets. We're too heavy to take on any weight until we get rid of these rockets. And he said, well, just unload them anywhere north of the river. So it was obvious, and he'd only been in country 2 weeks. He's got chaos all around him. And so finally, PCF 38's message got through. And he suddenly realized that the 43 boat was back there aground. And he asked the Seawolf helicopters to provide cover. When I heard all of that, I reported that. I said, this is 6-7 with the 103, and we're going to be there in 2 minutes. And the OTC said, I want you to turn around and go back and pick up your Marines, bring them up river, and insert them short of the ambush. Well, I knew this order was wrong. I mean, we're almost there. We could help. But I also knew that in the middle of battle, you've got to follow orders, even though I knew it was wrong. But to be honest, the real reason I turned around was I was scared, and it was more that, and I used that order as an excuse. So then I heard the OTC saying we got to get somebody to go back and help them, and Bill Shumanine on the 5 boat said, wait a minute. He said, I'm offloading some dead and wounded, and then we'll go. And another boat said, we've got too many wounded to man our guns. And so finally, Bill Shumanine says, I'm going back. And he started out, and the OTC said, wait a minute, I don't want you to go alone. And he, on the 31, went with them. They got there. Using the Seawolf helicopters and their guns, they suppressed the enemy fire long enough to get the wounded and the dead off 43, and the crew rescued, got out of there. And then all of a sudden we hear this voice, and it's Captain Hoffman. His call sign was Latch. Everybody knew that call sign. And it was so surprising to discover he's in one of the Seawolf helicopters above us. So he and the OTC are trying to decide what to do. And the OTC said, you know, maybe we ought to exit. Maybe we ought to get out of here. And Captain Hoffman said, PCF 43 is on fire. With all those explosives and the mortar rounds and the ammunition, it's a risk that it's going to explode. And if you are anywhere near it, you would be in harm's way. So finally they made a decision that they were just going to hunker down there and spend the night with all these Marines to provide a defensive perimeter. 20 minutes after they had rescued that crew, the PCF-43 began to explode. The Seawolf pilots were reporting it, and it was just, you know, their voices were exuberant with how violent these explosions were. And, I mean, that was the death of the Swift. The next morning, our 5 boats came upriver to help our sisters who were damaged. And I remember passing by the 43 boat, and it looked like the bleached bones of a whale. It was just twisted metal and you know, like the backbone broken, and it was hardly recognizable as a boat. I pulled alongside PCF 51. And I didn't know that she was damaged at the time, but then suddenly I saw it, and the skipper, his name was Russ Puppy, and he said that he was going to need a tow. And that's when he told me that his quartermaster Holloway had died. And then he told me that Don Groves was dead, and that was the first time I knew that. And then I got another boat to come alongside. We tied ourselves together, put tow lines to the 51, and the 2 of us pulled the 51 out to the LST. And so here's 12 sloop boats all tied up out there. Sailors are starting to clean up the boats and throw shell casings over the side. And I was looking at the faces of these sailors. Nobody was making eye contact with anybody. And I remember it was kind of like a vacant stare in their eyes. And it was, you could just smell the depression. And it was survivor's guilt that guys were feeling. And that was the end of that operation.